Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. Today, I'm proud to bring you Scholars from the Edge of Time with Nicholas Diak and Michele Brittany. Greetings, oh scholars.
Greetings, Hercules.
Good evening, sir. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you too. And I see that you are going to start our journey today with Son of Samson.
Well, we're going to end our journey with Son of Samson.
I stand corrected.
So, sorry, we got a meowing cat, but yeah, we got news and projects and stuff to share. So, but yes, today's focus will be on Son of Samson, though. But, I think, was it last month we talked about King Kong? And so we've had a lot of, cool adventures and other things going on since then. So, Michele, you're up, ladies first. Any cool news that you have to share with everyone?
Well, yeah, we talked about doing CocoCon, and that's part of the reason why we had discussed
very cool
King Kong. And so we actually had two panels that we were involved in.
What's CocoCon?
I'm sorry. Yes, that would be helpful. CocoCon is a fan-based convention on sci-fi, fantasy, and horror.
It's
genre.
like a traditional fan convention, the kind that went back to the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the more low-key affair instead of like the giant Comic-Cons out there.
Sorry, our cat has decided that he's going to talk through our segment.
Go grab him real quick. Bring him over.
Your cat is welcome. My Chihuahua frequently comes during Zoom meetings, and you see a little head come up like a periscope, lick my nose, and go back down like a periscope.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he's crying. He got food earlier.
He wants attention.
He probably wants attention. So I'll bring him in a bit. But we did do CocoCon over Labor Day weekend. We had two panels. The first one was Swords, Sorcery, Sandals, and Other Planets. It is a panel that I've run in the past at a number of different conventions in SoCal. So that was our Monday afternoon panel that we did. Nick was on it. I was moderating. And then we had an artist by the name of Gillian, our other panelist. And it was a very good conversation.
He's a sword and sorcery artist.
Yeah, and he upcycles. He had been a sign maker. So when things didn't quite go as planned with that, he decided to upcycle all this various materials. So like he'll paint on pieces of wood, stuff that had been cabinet, and other sign type materials. And just very impressive. His art is, I would say, traditional with a mix of modern. I don't know, you could probably describe it better.
He does oil paintings and kind of the Frazetta Boris Vallejo style, although his style I would say is a bit more cartoony rather than
I really got kind of an animator's type flair to, but
I bought one of his paintings, but it's on the wall, so I can't really grab it and bring it over, but it's really cool stuff. It's very 80s D&D-ish, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is this something you shared on Facebook? Because we share art. I believe I saw it.
Yeah. The one I shared was an art they used for a program book a couple of years back. But yeah, it's got a lady. It looks very much like Dija Thoris. There's a big ziggurat behind her. There's all these tentacles around, and she has a big sword. She's going whack, whack. It's a cool piece.
Yeah, and it's fairly large. So we're, Nick is now the proud owner, and it's in our living room. And it's really nice. It's a real nice piece. And he was a very interesting fellow, very, very knowledgeable, a bit more old school, but also trying to be up with the times. So like he was telling us about a new age group that really tries—
New Age Sword and Sorcery.
Thank you. In which they really try to look at the genre and look at how it can evolve and be more inclusive. So very good stuff on that front. The other panel that we did was the pre-code horror films that we joined the co-organizer, Hal Astel. And so we joined him and had a very lively discussion about a lot of different films, and I would say both were well attended for being kind of a more close-knit convention event. Definitely one that we really enjoyed, and we're planning to participate again next year, and hope to have maybe a couple of panels again next year as well.
Wow, sounds awesome.
It was our first con since 2019, maybe early 2020, before the pandemic happened. We might have.
I think Long Beach Comic-Con in like January, February of 2020 was our last con that we went to.
So it was nice that the local folks reached out to us. We, they've never met us. We haven't, really known a lot of people out there, and they took a chance on us, and everyone was happy, and we had a good time.
Yeah. Your turn.
My turn? All right. So we'll start off with something fun. This arrived just in the mail today. Like, I went to the post office and picked it up. So this might be a future Scholars from the Edge of Time episode. I don't know. But Scream Factory, Shout Factory, just released on Blu-ray The Warrior and the Princess.
Oh, wow. The Warrior and the Sorceress or Princess?
Oh, I'm sorry. Warrior and the Sorceress. Sorry. Princess. Geez.
With David Carradine, huh?
Yep. I haven't seen this one before, so this will be a fun watch. It's one of those Corman sword and sorcery films of the 80s, like the Deathstalker films and whatnot. So Michele looked at it and she's like, I don't buy David Carradine as a big muscular barbarian type guy, but
well, he really isn't. He's kind of like a sword and sorcery hero. And again, once upon a time, many years ago, I used to run D&D adventures that were sword and sorcery themed, and I used to take all these people, Deathstalker and Conan, and I forget what he was called, and people used to meet them during the course of the adventure, Fopper, the Grey Mouser, and so forth. It was a very interesting movie, very different than some of the other movies that were out there. Do you want spoilers, or should I let you enjoy it on your own?
I don't mind.
Let's see. We'll do an episode on it, because
Okay.
all I know is it takes place on another planet, so that makes it kind of Sword and Planet-ish. And also the lady on the cover has 4 some breastises, and I didn't notice that at first glance. So when I picked up the Blu-ray and looked at it, I'm like, all right, this movie's gonna be awesome. Wait a second. That's very Total Recall before Total Recall.
And then he was like, well, I guess this explains, an attraction. And I said, yes, there's 4 reasons to watch this film now.
And I believe she's actually in the movie, if I remember correctly.
Oh, wow. So she's not just on the cover and
not just on the cover. If I recall correctly, she's actually in the movie.
Oh, okay. Cool.
I don't think we did it for Scholars of the Edge of Time, or maybe we did. Did we? No, we totally did. It was a couple months ago. We did that episode on the Albert Pune movie, The Sword and the Sorcerer, with
yes, we did.
Yeah, and we're all marveling at the cover, like, this cover is actually the final scene in the movie. The cover's not lying to us. This is true. He's actually with a 3-headed sword battling a giant serpent guy in the labyrinths underneath it. It's right. Like, wow, the poster doesn't lie, because some of these posters are they stretch the truth a little bit.
Just a little bit.
All right, your turn again.
Sure. So I guess it's kind of sticking with the appearances. I'm actually going to be on Galactic Terrors. It is a YouTube show hosted by the New York chapter of the Horror Writers Association. I'm actually going to be out there on Thursday, October 13th. They've started to add nonfiction guests. So I'm going to be one of their first nonfiction writer guests. So I'll be reading a segment from my presentation that I gave during the Anne Radcliffe conference at StokerCon, in which I discussed Bernie Wrightson's illustrations for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'll be giving an excerpt reading from that paper, and that'll be October 13th.
Cool.
And back to you.
All right. I don't have a prop for this one, not yet anyway, but I don't know when the publishing date is, but Weird Tales magazine their next issue that's coming out is a sword and sorcery themed issue. And I actually reached out and said, hey, authors in this are contributors to this issue. If anyone wants me to interview them real quick, let me know. And I had a couple people hit me up. So I did some little micro interviews with some of the sword and sorcery authors and poets that are appearing in the next issue. And that's at my website. I think that article went up maybe 2 weeks ago or so. So I don't know when the issue is actually coming out, but I mean, I don't have any involvement in the issue, but I wanted to, spread the love for that issue because, hey, sword and sorcery. So it was a fun little quick project to do.
Yeah.
Your turn.
My turn. Earlier this week, can I say what we discussed the fan to fan? Is it okay to say?
Yeah, I'm serious on that.
Sorry. I interviewed or was a guest actually on Fan to Fan. They're a podcast, and Nicholas and I have been on their podcast before. I've been on to discuss Highlander. More recently, they published the James Bond discussion I had with them. And earlier this week, in fact, Tuesday night, we talked about the 1979 film Phantasm. And so that was actually a really fun and interesting discussion. A lot of, kind of like, oh, yeah, if you think about it this way, here's things that kind of fit together. And so it was really nice. I hadn't seen the film since Nick and I watched, I think we tried to watch all of the films, about 15 years ago?
Yeah, like 2007, 2008.
Yeah, and the reason why we were doing that is that when we lived up in Seattle area, they were doing a new convention called Crypticon. And so it was all horror based. And we did this marathon watch because we were going to meet Don Costarelli, which we did get to meet him. And
we're like Phantasm, Beastmaster.
Yeah. So we just prep so that way we can, chat with him. And then I think it was maybe 1 or 2 years later, we went to San Diego Comic-Con and we actually got to meet Reggie Bannister, who was Reggie the friend in the first one and then was in subsequent sequels. But we also got to meet him too, just a year or two later. And so anyway, I don't have a drop date on that one yet, but I think it's all related to October. So I imagine it will be out probably within the next month or so. And you?
On the subject of podcasts, our next episode of HP Lovecast, we're going to be talking about Prince of Darkness.
Oh,
I have not seen this film, so we watched it and it was okay. Not the best John Carpenter film, not the worst, but it's not The Thing. It's not Escape from New York. So that will be recording and dropping that this weekend. So that's our little upcoming Halloween type stuff for our podcast, I suppose.
Well, it's still in September.
All of autumn season is Halloween season.
Oh, okay. But I think in October.
I would support that interpretation.
Oh, okay, cool. I think though in October we've been talking about watching Mimic 2.
Yep.
Because last year we watched Mimic, and that was really a fun revisit because I hadn't seen it since it first came out. So it was really quite fun to watch and then discuss. And
I bought the 3-disc box set of Mimic.
Yes.
We're going to get our money's worth out of it and watch Mimic 2 and Mimic 3, even though they're probably going to be
bad.
They're probably going to be very bad.
The first one was great, but so we'll see. But I think that's what we're going to discuss next month. So on to kind of stuff that I'm writing. I actually got a post or two up at my website talking about appearances, just kind of reiterating that my Highlander call for abstracts is still open. It's on a rolling basis. So do check that out. Essays that I'm working on, I actually just submitted, and I may have spoken about this last month, but it's Incantu or The Living Mummy. I submitted that abstract. I'm waiting to hear if that's been accepted as I've written it, or if the editor's going to want a few tweaks. But along with that, as I mentioned, I'm working on the Highlander collection, writing on the website, and then I'll also be writing that Cats essay, in which I'll be looking at the representation of the white cat in the 1999 The Mummy with Brendan Fraser. So I have one more thing, but I'll pass back over to you.
All right. I had a new review drop at my website just today. I'd show the comic book cover, but it's very not safe for work. So I'll just show one of the swags that came with the comic. It's a little holographic lady there, but it's a Sword and Planet comic called Alicia Carter. And you know, her last name's Carter, so like John Carter. So you know, it wears its homage on its sleeve. But it's about she's a thief, you know, an intergalactic thief, like a Han Solo or you know, a Star-Lord from Guardians of the Galaxy, and she has a robot companion. They're on a garbage planet. They stole a diamond or a crystal, and they're trying to evade bounty hunters. So it's very lighthearted. It's very much in the Star Warsy, Guardians of the Galaxy, Ice Pirates, very Ice Pirates.
Oh, I love Ice Pirates.
So, you know, this is one of those fun roguish type intergalactic adventure comics, I'd say. But, you know, it's supposed to be a throwback to the pulpy stuff as well. That's what they said in their little Kickstarter. But it was a Kickstarter comic, which I'm a sucker for Kickstarter comics, and especially, you know, the sword and something genre. And so that just arrived, and I enjoyed it. So I did up a quick review of it. So that just dropped today at my website, a little write-up on Alicia, the astounding adventures of Alicia Carter and Robot.
And Robot.
And even though he has a real name, they call him and Robot on the title.
Kind of makes me think of MST3000.
Maybe.
With Mike or Josh and
the
their robots. Yeah.
All right, back to you.
So the last thing that I would share with between all of us and our listeners is that I'm going to be submitting an abstract. There's a call for essays on 1970s vampire films. Ooh. So I'm planning to submit an abstract for that. I think the one I'm looking at is Daughters of Darkness. Mm-hmm. It's a early 1970s film set in England. And it has, you'll have to remind me of the actress who's also Anuka.
Oh, she's in Vampires, not Daughters of Darkness. There's two lesbian vampire films in the 70s.
Yeah, I mean, well, it has an alternate title. That's why I said the Daughters one. But that's the abstract I'm going to be writing up hopefully within this next week or so, and submitting that for consideration. That's kind of my news.
All right. My last two bits, another article at my website on Mai Tais. I found an old 1970s cocktail book. So I just wrote about one of the recipes in there. Not genre related, but you know me, I like my tiki and cocktails. Yes. And finally, the next project I'm working on, this one just came out of the blue, so it's going to be a quick turnaround. The movie Kaltiki, the Immortal Monster. There's a zine coming out that focuses on the found footage genre, you know, like Blair Witch and Cannibal Holocaust and the Cloverfield Monster or whatever that movie was. Kaltiki has a brief found footage scene in it. So I'll be talking about that and how, it's a 1959 Italian cosmic horror story, so which was made 1 year before our subject for tonight, Son of Samson.
Very nice transition.
That was a great transition. We got some classic Italian genre fare here.
Now, what I would say about Kaltiki that Nick did mention is that that's probably one of the first instances of found footage being included in a film. Mm-hmm. So there's a good reason to cover that.
Yeah. So tonight on our Scholars from the Edge of Time, last month we talked King Kong. I think in July we actually talked about the Sword and the Sorcerer. And before that we talked about Lion of Thebes, which is funny because that's a Mark Forrest Egyptian peplum. And guess what? Son of Samson is a Mark Forrest Egyptian peplum. So So excited to talk about this one. This just got a brand new release from Kino. So it's not a muddled, 3 generations of VHS print on a budget DVD or anything. This was a nice edition. I mean, it doesn't have too many supplements, just a couple commentaries, but it's
the print looked good.
The print looked good. So it was nice to see some love given to an old school sword and sandal film. It's one of the things that we'll always lament about, that we'll watch a film and it's like, man, the color is saturated, it's cropped, it's censored, it's these movies need some love, and we do our best to talk about them, which helps, but so it's nice when a company steps up and releases something nice. So it also made the viewing experience a lot more palpable. So let's get with the plot. I have a long plot on this one.
Oh, wow.
So pull out your popcorn.
Surprisingly, for an 89-minute film, there's a lot that happens in it. This is a quick movie. It doesn't lull around like Lion of Thieves did.
Yeah, and it feels like there was like a number of kind of subplots and various things going on, which made it for more complex than maybe other films of the time. Sorry.
All right, so here we go. Egypt of antiquity has been taken over by the Persians. Queen Smedes ruthlessly rules the land, with the pharaoh as more or less a powerless figurehead. She forces many Egyptians into slavery, building monuments or pleasuring others. When confronted by some slaves, Smedes has an assassin kill the pharaoh. Meanwhile, the pharaoh's son, Kinemon, has fallen in love with an Egyptian commoner, Nofret. However, he must leave her to go off and do soldiery things. He eventually encounters son of Samson, but this is a machista. He eventually encounters Machista in the woods, where they each save each other from lion attacks. Kinemon is called to the city to take the spot of Pharaoh, with Queen Smedes wanting to marry him. He wants to rule Egypt fair and just, but the queen and her conspirators put a magical amulet on him, which makes him fall in love with the queen and forget everything else. Nofret and her village are attacked by Persians. All the men, save one grizzled old man, are killed, and the women are rounded up to be sold as slaves. Machista intercepts the Persians, easily defeats them, and takes over escort duty to get the women to a city. En route, they run out of water, and they encounter a not-so-honest merchant who is hiding water and will not share. Machista is about to give him one for, until he notices a reservoir of hidden water in the rocks. He uses his strength to unearth it, saving everyone.
Yay.
Yeah.
At the city, the guards police with brutality. Machista wants to get an audience with Kinemon, but gets thwarted. He becomes a hero for a slave rebellion instead. He finally gets access to the palace and is almost captured, but he escapes a crushing room, one of those rooms where the walls close in on him, that's followed by an alligator pit. Soon, there are chariot games, with the winner of the chariot games being able to mow down slaves and the recaptured women that Machista had rescued earlier. Machista saves the day again, and he pretends to be smitten with Queen Smedes, which greatly upsets the leaders of the slave rebellion, who think they have been abandoned. Not a chance. Machista plans to reason with Kinemon, but it fails. But he's able to escape the palace, round up his followers, and have a massive battle outside the city. Slaves versus guards, slaves versus Persians. In the melee, Kinemon's magic amulet falls off, and he regains his memories and his love for Nofret. Everyone returns to the palace to confront the evil queen. She tries to pull the old assassin trick again, but fails, as the corrupt merchant from earlier turns out to be not so corrupt, and he takes an arrow from Machista. Rather than being captured, the queen tosses herself in the aforementioned alligator pit. With Kinemon back on the side of good, he returns to be Pharaoh, and Machista takes off for his next adventure. So, a lack of snark for me on this one, because I dug this sword and sandal film. This was a good one. But ladies first, or second, or
no, go for it.
Well, what did you think?
Get
it out of my system.
Yeah, get it out.
Okay, this is our third Mark Forrest film, and they have started off not good. Well, okay. So prior to we watched, but we're all this year. So this is we've covered three Mark
This
Forrest.
is the Mark Forrest year.
Yeah, it's a Mark. I mean, well, he did pass away earlier, so that makes sense. Yeah, he passed away like a month before this re-release came out, which is a little sad. You know, if he was still kicking it, maybe he could have been interviewed for it or something. Anyway, we first watch Hercules against the Mongols, which was okay. That was a Machista character who was really laid back in that one. He was just kind of relaxed and groovy and chilling. But then we watched Line of Thieves. And, you know, we were both kind of excited for Line of Thieves originally because it was Egyptian peplum. You know, she does the Egyptian stuff. I do the sword and sandal stuff, and it just works. But man, I think our general consensus was that movie, even though it was about the same length as Son of Samson, was a slog. And it was boring. And unfortunately, Mark Forrest he didn't have much to do in this. He just did a lot of standing around and being a guard. You know, he gets maybe into 3 fights. You know, he's just not utilized very well in Line of Thieves. But Son of Samson, man, I mean, he just doesn't give up. I mean, he action sequence after action sequence, he's hucking boulders, hucking wheels, hucking trees at folks, lifting up entire obelisks on his back, wrestling crocodiles, wrestling lions, leading slave rebellions, breaking chains, breaking bars, flirting with the various women, because all the women love him in this one. I mean, he's just all over the map. And you know, while, you know, he didn't give much to do in Line of Thieves, he is just front and center in Son of Samson, and better performance, better everything. It's just a fun sword and sandal film that definitely leaves Line of Thieves and even Hercules and the Mongols in the dust, I think.
I actually really enjoyed Hercules and the Three Mongols, even though it was like a little kind of confusing why he was in the Middle Ages and, you know, when he's from antiquity.
Machista is timeless.
I guess so.
I can actually give you insight into that when Michele uses.
Please do so.
Mahistis was one of the epithets belonging to Hercules in antiquity. And when they did Cabiria, they were going to call the Machista character Hercules, but then they changed it to Machiste. When I was growing up, when I was in Greece, there were traveling strongmen. And it wasn't the same strongmen. They were traveling strongmen who come to a town and like they throw sledgehammers in the air and butt it with their heads. They pull cars with their teeth. They break chains. They would do, you know, strongman stunts. And these people collectively were machistes or machistas. So machista didn't have to be the same person. You know, it's not really a name, it's a designation.
Like James Bond.
Okay.
Why not? I mean, we have the Euro spy films that came out after these.
That's true. So it's more a term rather than attached really to a particular person or a particular time period.
So there are still machistes wandering around Greece last time I checked. So, you know, they have different names. Some are Hercules, some are Samson, some are, you know, some other strongmen throughout history. Some use their birth name, but they're all machistes, you know, so that's where that comes from.
Okay, well, that helps to make sense. But I did kind of like that film a little bit more. I felt like Mark Forrest's acting was a bit more relaxed, and I actually liked that he had kind of a playfulness about him in that film where
he was way more serious in this one.
He was, and I actually looked to see like where did this film fall in his filmography, and it was actually his second credited role, and it was his first occurrence as the Machiste or as, you know, Hercules. So that kind of makes sense that it would be a little bit more, you know, he had more serious, you know, it's one of his first roles. He wants to do well. So I can definitely understand why I probably liked the further along in his filmography than this one. But I will say that I thought that his show of strength was definitely on display with this one. Like Nick was saying, that there were so many different things that he was doing that really did put his body, it was a spectacle. You got to see all of his muscles. Obviously he's not wearing a ton of things, a ton of clothing. So you really do get to see his body in action, just as you would expect to see like Steve Reeves and others of that time. So I would say that in that regard, it was pretty good. Of course, we're watching it, and I told Nick, I'm like, they've got the geography wrong and a few other things, but generally,
the opening credits, it's showing different shots of Egypt, and Michelle's like, that's Thebes, that's the Valley of the Kings, that's this, that's that. They're nowhere near each other. And I'm like, Michele, plebes like me won't know that. We're just impressed that it's Egypt stuff instead of,
I know. I have to understand, that even though I've been there and I know that there's 400 miles between this landmark and another one, but they're kind of, playing loose with the geography. I did enjoy the movie. I like that it was set in Egypt. I felt like we got a little bit more insight into the culture. A little bit more, since it was later rather than an earlier dynasty. So I do appreciate that there was that. And you definitely had, the iconography of ancient Egypt throughout the film. Smity's, the queen, very beautiful. And her outfits were gorgeous. I think they definitely must have spent a little bit of money making sure that she was very beautiful, and her outfits were always, just really impeccable. I think they did try to kind of fit within what you would have expected. So obviously somebody went through, looked at the hieroglyphics and, kind of the clothing. The only problem that I had is that they'd wear their hats, but sideways. And I just really feel like, did they not understand that hieroglyphics was the side, but that didn't mean that that's how you're supposed to wear, like, there are different crowns and things like that. So, the visor has his crown, whatever, sideways, his headdress sideways. So you don't see it until he's walking sideways, that you then see, and you're like, yes, I've seen that and part of a hieroglyphics, on one of the temple walls. And they did that all the time. So that was kind of one of those idiosyncrasies that, I had to kind of chuckle every time I saw.
Maybe they belong to a secret society or something.
Maybe so. And they,
frat guys, so it's a frat prank to wear your headdress sideways.
It could be, but enjoyable. I do think I liked the Three Mongols a little bit better. I think I liked the displays of his muscular abilities a little bit more in that, but he definitely, they were not sitting on their laurels with regards to the narrative and the beats. It was constant, and the time did go quick. I was really surprised by that.
I think we've talked about in other Scholars in the Edge of Time with Peplum films, the idea that these are very body-centric films, and, the man's on display of his muscles, the concept of, man versus machine, man versus animal, man versus himself. And I remember back, we talked about Yore, it's one of those literal instances of man versus machine where he's fighting robots and stuff, something you don't see a lot in Peplum. But this also has, I would say, a man versus machine aspect to it as well. Not in a normal sense, but one of the centerpieces of the film is there's all these slaves and they're trying to erect an obelisk. So they've got their ramp, they've got this intricate pulley system, and they're trying to, push it up so it can topple into place. And they're also not being treated right. There's a taskmasters whipping them, and since they're too busy whipping people instead of being safety first supervisors, things go awry. The pulleys snap and the obelisk falls over and crushes some slaves. But Machista steps in, he lifts up the entire obelisk, saves the day. he's able to get it repositioned so other folks can get the pulleys working again, and he gets down there and starts tugging at people and they get in a place. And so it's kind of a where the engineering and ingenuity of simple machines, levers, fulcrums, pulleys, and all that stuff, where they fail, here's a person that steps in with his brawn and actually overcomes that. So it's an interesting instance of, I would say, man versus machine in a sword and sandal film where man wins. There's also man versus nature. I mean, he gets to a wrestling match with a lion, and just like what we talked about earlier this year, or maybe it was late last year, I'm not sure, but Ursus in the Valley of the Lions, he goes in, he starts playing around with his pumas and lions, but his back is always to us as the audience. Like, well, when the back is to us, we know it's a lion tamer. So Samson's the same way. So any shot where, the wrestling the lion that's to us, like, well, that's a lion tamer. That's not Mark Forrest. But a little sad to see the lions always, get hurt because they're lions.
Yeah, I can't watch that. I have too many cats here, and it's just like, no. I'm like, Nick, tell me when it's over.
But right after the scene, there's kind of I think an important scene for just kind of understanding peplums in their entirety is Kinnaman, So Machista is about to get mauled by a lion, and Kinnaman shoots it with a bow. And then the lion is about to get Kinnaman, and Machista goes and wrestles the lion. So they've saved each other. And Kinnaman's like, hey, you're a good fighter, all this stuff. Where's your armor? And Machista's like, he just holds up his fists, his arms. He's like, these guns here, I have what I need right here. And, that pretty much sums up, I think, the attitude that all the Ursuses, Hercules, Samsons, Machistas, and so on and so forth have. This is an early peplum film, 1960. So, I think it kind of sets the stage with, this is my prototypical hero. And what do I have? Well, I have me. I have everything here. In fact, this is probably one of the most independent heroes I've seen in a sword and sandal film. I mean, most of the heroes are pretty independent. They're able to, anything that comes their way, be it lions or soldiers, they're able to combat them, usually in a bowling ball pin type fashion, throw one rock, they all knock over. But, at some point, usually the hero gets captured and is chained or put in a cell or something. And for some reason, they can't escape, and someone usually sets them free. That actually doesn't happen in this one. Even there's a scene where he gets drugged by the queen. I mean, as soon as he's tossed into the crocodile pit, he's like, okay, I'm awake. And we wrestle a crocodile and get out of here. He's truly an independent one. No one saves him. He does all the saving.
Well, except for Kinnaman at the beginning,
which
is to, create this kind of like brotherhood between them. Yeah, I was thinking about the fact that he is independent, and unlike some of the other films where there's definitely a love interest, there is a woman who's interested in him. He even says that, he loves her eyes and thinks that she's beautiful. But for him, his destiny is greater than that. So even though he kind of flirts with the queen, and I do think it's as the hero, he goes into the lion's den, so to speak, to assess the main villain, so to speak, and then goes from there based on the information he gathers. But he doesn't really have a love interest, because for him, I'd almost say that there's a purity about him, that he's remaining steadfast to his overall destiny, which is to help other people, it seems, because he doesn't seem to have a real motivation otherwise with regards to helping the slaves, other than, he wants to help them out and not have them enslaved because they're not treated well.
But also the old man basically says, the gods say you do this. And he's like, well, if the gods say so. I mean.
Yeah, and it just kind of reiterates why he is that he is, and helps to substantiate his motivation. One of the things that I thought was interesting about the film is that usually Egyptians are always portrayed as the villain. And in this case, our femme fatale is our primary villain, which is the queen. So I thought that was actually really interesting. And more generally, the Egyptians were not in control. They were being controlled by the Persians, or there was an effort to basically, keep the Egyptians down. The queen was, involved in slavery. She's trying to sell off the women. She's trying to basically break the Egyptian back so that way the Persians can continue to rule, or rule more totally. So I thought that was actually very interesting, because Egyptians usually are always in control. And I thought that was fascinating that they weren't in this film.
The funny thing about the queen is, in a lot of these sword and sandal films, there's always the one femme fatale / vamp character that is a turncoat. They turn in someone else to try to gain favor and gain power. And usually they wind up getting thwarted, or they get their comeuppance. I'm thinking of, Ursus in the Valley of the Lions, where, one of the other prisoner ladies turns in, one of the other ladies because she wants favor with the usurper. Right. And he's like, I don't need you after all. No. And we see that quite a bit where, the scheming woman character in these films, it's a very sexist thing to say, but it is a sexist thing that these characters are there. But in this film, that character is actually successful. The queen is a scheming, cunning, a ruthless character. And, she does get her comeuppance at the very end, but she's not the stock sort of variety, a throwaway character that's easily tossed aside by, the male monarch, or the male, temporary ruthless ruler, or something like. She is that person. She didn't need to scheme to get to it.
She doesn't stray from what she wants. Like, earlier Nick was saying that, she wants to marry Kinnaman. Well, she's supposed, in one of the plots and synopsis that I read, she's supposed to be his godmother. So it's kind of like, wow, okay, well, we know about Egyptians, brothers marrying sisters. So I guess it shouldn't be such a stretch that a godmother wants to marry her godson.
The love interest thing you were talking about earlier, and also talking about, Hercules and the Mongols. In both movies, there's this abandonment of the Hercules / machista character. And I think that's kind of crazy to me as, an audience member, because you have these heroic characters that prove their heroism and their strength and their abilities time and time again. Well, in this film, Machista, he pretends to be under the queen's spell so he can get closer, but more importantly, get closer to Kinnaman to talk to him. But he's not really under her spell. But it, like all his cohorts in the slave rebellion, and even the ladies he rescued earlier, who have seen him multiple times in action with his heroism and taking care of them, they write him off real quick, like, oh, he's abandoning us, and he's gone over to the dark side, and he let us down. And the same thing happens in Hercules versus the Mongols as well, where Hercules, he wins in the arena. I mean, it's, not a big Colosseum arena, it's a little tiny pit, but still. And he's like, I will be your slave if you let this lady I like free. And he actually has a love interest in that. And despite, this woman, like, oh, I know Hercules, his deeds travel the land. I know what he's capable of. He was a trusted person to my father. All it takes is like the one evil advisor to say, oh, he's a bad person. And she's like, you're right, he is. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I mean, don't you see this character? These are legendary characters, even in the canon of your own film. You just said, he's a legendary character who is heroic and has all these deeds. And it's sort of interesting how quickly these heroic characters are abandoned. And of course, because they're heroic and strong, they're able to, pull themselves back up. And everyone's like, okay, you're back to being a hero again. We love you. And I'm like, you guys are all jerks. But it's something that happens in a lot of peplum films, I think, where, they need to have a steadfast leader, or, the folks can't stand up for themselves. They have to have that Hercules that come in and save the day, save the kingdom, return the monarchy to its rightful place, and, leave. Like, stranger comes to town, does his thing, stranger leaves. But I was just a little perplexed in this one when everyone just kind of gave up on him. I'm like, no, it doesn't work like that. Come on, people. Or maybe it's very cynical and it does work like that in real life we're able to. You know what? I'll toss away my friendship or liking of that person on the drop of a hat.
Yeah, I actually thought that it was a bit odd and felt like it was a gap in the narrative to have everybody so quickly turn against him.
That might be a dubbing thing. It could be.
It could be. So, obviously this is Italian produced and directed. So we have an international group of actors. So yes, it could be like Smides, Queen Smides is actually, she was a Cuban actress. There's several Italian actresses, actors. I think the visor was an Austrian actor. He's very tall and slender, and so it was kind of like, yeah, he was a little bit out of place with everybody else. But and then of course Mark Forrest, an American, Italian American. But he spoke fluent Italian before he went over there. So you do have quite a eclectic group, international actors all working together. So I guess it could be that there's a little gap in maybe the dubbing, but I did find that to be kind of one of those kind of off notes with regards to narrative.
I know there's two Mark Forrests. Is the Mark Forrest this one American?
His name was Lou Degny, and he was American, and he was Italian, but his name wasn't American enough.
Okay.
He wanted American-sounding names. That's why Sergio Chiani became Alan Steele. So Lou Degny wasn't American enough, so they made him Mark Forrest.
I know there was another Mark Forrest, because our friend Hal was neighbors with a Mark Forrest that we got him in touch with, Dennis, but different one. He was more of a voice actor.
Yeah.
But he did spaghetti westerns.
Yeah.
One other thing I want to point out in Son of Samson was how violent this film was compared to other sword sandal films of the period. The type of violence that I would expect to see in a Italian Gothic horror of the period, or a giallo, or even a spaghetti western, because some of those got pretty brutal. But there's scenes in this where, like, people are getting speared right in the mouth and speared right through their bellies into the ground, and it was pretty not necessarily gory, but like I would never thought to see someone speared through the mouth in a sword and sandal film. I'd expect that in a slasher.
Yeah, and there was like blood coming out. Yeah. So it wasn't like it was just a spear and then you didn't see anything. There was actually like squids or, an early form of that. Yeah, and I think I even read somewhere that this was kind of an unusual film in that it was more gory.
It was, aside from, characters getting whipped and, slashes on the back and typical, sword fighing and whatnot. But yeah, there was a lot of impalements and stuff in this one, which was just, I don't want to say it felt out of place just because I'm sorry. Italian productions of the 60s, all hands are off of what they're going to do in those films. And so I guess I was still kind of shocked to see what I would expect to see in a giallo, a Gothic, and so on and so forth in a peplum film.
Particularly this early. This was from 1960. And the one scene where they're out in the arena and the winner has a chariot,
the dismemberment chariot.
Yeah, and it's got on the wheels these like really long, what would you say, spikes or blades that would spin around, and they had blindfolded all of the slaves
and women. Women you rescued,
and it was the women. It was women and the old man, and so they'd get kind of like run down and then they'd fall and you'd see all the blood and gash on their legs, and it was it was very tense and brutal.
It's like, well, we can't one up the Ben-Hur scene in a conventional sense, so we're going to do it our way. And the funny thing is this kind of torturous dismemberment, I can recall being used almost 20 years later in Caligula, where Malcolm McDowell as Caligula, you know, he has people buried up to their necks in like this arena, and he's got this giant walled contraption that's got spinning blades, because it's totally, you know, not anachronistic, that goes and, you know, lawnmowers everyone's heads off. And so it's kind of a precursor to that.
Yeah, and I think and actually an open scene, they had you know, slaves, male and female, buried up to their necks.
Oh, that too, that's right. They were burying people with that. Yeah. So, you know, a lot of the peplum, now, to be fair, a lot of the peplum we do see are from American edits that are extremely cropped, edited, and, you know, 5 generations moved on VHS. And so I know that a good chunk of those have been edited for more television purposes, to be more kid friendly. And so maybe the Son of Samson's more of an unedited version. And if that's the case, I get that, but it's still just, it was just kind of shocking, just that gory, and I don't think it was a mean-spirited film. I shouldn't say that, but this kind of how much like other Italian films of the period, how boundary pushing it was. That's probably the way I should go. Very transgressive, especially for a sword and sandal film, which are, you know, a bit more, I want to say, covertly, you know, Christian, because, you know, the Christian Democrats held the purse strings back then. And so, you know, there was still kind of some intrinsic, punish the wicked type things going on. This actually didn't quite have that. In fact, it also had nudity. There was a slave that bared her breasts really quick. I mean, I think it was blurred and censored a bit, but that was still like that's not something you would see in a normal sword and sandal film of the period. You would have your ladies in, you know, the translucent gowns doing belly dancing, of which the queen does perform one. I mean, let's be honest, it's like a 5-minute intercourse scene, but without intercourse. I mean, she's dancing for Mark Forrest, and after that scene, you can just imagine him with a cigar going, baby, that's awesome. But
she did a very good job, actually, because having seen belly dancing, and I used to do belly dancing, she did a pretty good job. She just didn't roll her stomach, but, you know, we can forgive her for that.
Yeah, the Machista in this one, he's very much a ladies' man, and he rebuffs them all, I think. Yeah. I mean, he rescues an entire village of women, and they're all kind of swooning a little bit for him, some more than others. You know, even the queen is like, oh, you are the man for me. And, you know, he's pretending to be the man for her.
But I think it was always about the destiny.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So coming up top of the hour, I mean, that's Son of Samson, a pretty transgressive sword and sandal film, early Mark Forrest peplum. I dug it. Nice, clean print from Kino. Very, very fast-paced, very action-oriented, very, I would say, just like the original Hercules, it helps set the standards of, I mean, because Hercules came out 1-2 years earlier, so this is still a very early peplum of, you know, what kind of hero to expect in these films, and I dug it.
And I would just add that I think that his, you know, being driven by a higher purpose, and a different, you know, his destiny. I think that we also get that with later films when we get into the spaghetti westerns. So, I mean, you could definitely, you know, mark the trajectory from the peplum to the spaghetti westerns, and then going into other films, this being kind of influential, you know, later. I mean, you could say that there's, you know, similarities with Gladiator, Ridley Scott's movie in 2000. So definitely, you know, important, valuable to look at. And it's nice that Kino came out with such a nice version.
Thank you. That was incredibly awesome. I have that movie on DVD, but it must be a cut version because I don't recognize some of the scenes that you described. So now I need to go on a quest to find that one.
Time to update. you've been missing out, man, on the Quentin Tarantino edit here.
I have to remedy that. How can people enter your worlds?
Well, people can go to my website, Michele Brittany. So that's Michele Brittany, 2 T's, 1 L, .com. And then I've also got an author page over at Amazon. So I would say those are the two. And then, you know, check out HP Lovecast. I post a lot of stuff related to that in our various, you know, well, he does the Twitter, I do the Instagram, and we share on the Facebook. So,
and I'm at nickdiak.com. That's where you can find links to all my social media, all the podcasts and stuff that we both appear on, links to all my essays, bibliographies, and stuff like that. I'm gregarious. I'm easy to track down.
Incredibly awesome. And I don't know if I informed you of this, but we're adding another Sword and Sandal cinema show every month.
Oh,
so
cool.
We're doing that one on rotation totally. So it's not going to be, it's going to be different all the time. So if you guys are interested, I'll put you on the list and we can work, you know, coordinate our schedules, and we can get more Nicholas and Michele goodness.
Yeah, definitely. Keep us in mind.
I definitely will. Thanks again. And thanks to everybody who will watch this on YouTube, hopefully by tomorrow.
All right, cool. Have a great upcoming weekend, everyone. And thanks for having us, Hercules.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay, I think I might not have done that correctly. Let's try that.